Of Unit 3. So today we're just going to start by going over some general polynomial definitions. So this is going to be a decent amount of writing, but you do want to have it written down because you're going to have to reference it later on. So make sure you have it written down, especially for your homework. So the first one we're going to talk about is a term. And a term is a number, variable, or a product of number and or variables. Okay, so it could be just a number. It could be just a variable, which is the same as a letter, or it could be a product of the two of them. Terms are always subtracted by plus or minus signs. So let's write a couple examples of what a term would look like. So for a term, we could have 4. We could also have x squared. Or we could have a product of those two, which would be 4x squared. So each of those, 4x squared and 4x squared, are all considered a term. So make sure you have that written down before you move on in the video. Okay, next, let's take a look at a coefficient. What is a coefficient? So a coefficient is the numeric factor of a term that has a variable. So what's really important there is to notice that it has a variable. Okay, so it needs to have a variable in order for it to be considered a coefficient. So let's take a look at what we wrote earlier. Remember on that previous slide I wrote 4x squared. So what would the coefficient be? Well, it's the numeric factor of a term that has a variable. So it's going to be this numeric factor right here. Okay, so the coefficient for that term would be 4. Okay, let's take a look at what the degree of a term is going to be. So the degree is the exponent on the variable of a term. Now the exponent is that little number. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at that. So let's take a look at this 4x squared term. So the exponent on the variable of the term, so that's this little guy up here, that represents the degree. So if I said to you, what's the degree of that term, you would tell me that it's a second degree term because the power or the exponent of that term is 2. Okay, let's go ahead and let's take a look at those next couple of terms. So next we have like terms. So let's take a look at what a like term is. Come on. So a like term are terms that have the same variables raised to the same powers. And all constants are like terms. Well, we'll talk about what a constant is here in a second. But in order for something to be considered a like term, it needs to have the same variables raised to the same exponents. So we had that 4x squared that we were talking about. So what's another example of a like term? Well, that would be 3x squared. That's a like term. Negative 2x squared. That's a like term. The coefficients can change, but the biggest thing is that all of those exponents are the same. Okay? Next, let's take a look at a constant. What is a constant? A constant is a term that contains only a number. Constants have no variable part. So constants usually come at the end of our polynomials, and we'll talk about why in a second. But constants are things that are just a number. So it could be like 6. It could be negative 3. It could even be 1 million. All of those are constants. They're just numbers. There's no letters associated with those numbers. All right, let's keep moving forward. Okay, let's take a look at a polynomial. What is a polynomial? So I'm going to go ahead and pull that over. A polynomial is a set of terms separated by pluses and minuses. So we're going to have a bunch of those terms. We've already written some of them, and they're going to be separated by pluses and minuses. Here's an example of a polynomial. We could take 3x squared. Then I'm going to subtract 4x, and then I'm going to add 2. This is a polynomial. There's multiple terms being separated by pluses and minuses. Okay, next. Let's take a look at the degree of the polynomial. So the degree of the polynomial was the largest exponent of all the terms in the polynomial. So first let's write out a polynomial before we're going to really talk about what that means. So let's just take this polynomial right here. So we have 3x squared minus 2x plus 4. Now if you remember when we talked about the degree of a term, we were talking about the exponent. Right? Well, to get the degree of the polynomial, we want to find the largest exponent. And the largest exponent is 2. So if I asked you what's the degree of this polynomial, you would say that the exponent is 2, or its second degree. Okay, one thing I want to point out to you is if you have a term that's just like an x, it has nothing else on it, that has an exponent of 1. Okay, and if you have a constant, that's kind of like having x to the 0, so it has an exponent of 0. We'll talk about that more in a second on the next note sheets. The most important thing I want you to know, though, is that if we have just an x, that the exponent on that x is 1 if there's no exponent written. Let's take a look at this, what a standard form of a polynomial is. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that down. So a polynomial is in standard form when all like terms are combined and the terms are written in descending order of the exponent. So it needs to be written in descending order. So let's go ahead and let's write out a polynomial that's in standard form. So maybe I'll have negative 4x to the third plus 2x squared plus 1x minus 6. So what I notice about this polynomial is that as I'm going downward, my exponents are also going downward. Okay, likewise, I have all of my like terms combined. And we'll practice combining like terms here in a second. But the great thing is that they're all combined. Okay, and if they aren't combined, then the polynomial is not in standard form. Okay, let's take a look at the leading coefficient. So the leading coefficient is the coefficient of the first term when the polynomial is written in standard form. So in order for that to be true, we'd have to write it in standard form first. So let's just take a polynomial that's written in standard form to start off with. So we have 4x squared minus 3x plus 2. So if it's in standard form, which it is because all of our like terms are combined and it's going in descending order, then the leading coefficient is the coefficient of the first term, or the coefficient of the term with the highest degree. And remember, when you write out coefficients, you just write out the number. So the leading coefficient of this guy would be 4. Okay? All right, moving forward. Okay, so we're going to just go ahead and skip over this step, and we're going to move on to combining things in writing them in standard form. So when I'm doing this, what I want to do is I want to combine my like terms. So let's go ahead and start by underlining the like terms. So I have these guys that both have x cubed. I'm going to put them in orange. And then I have these guys with x squared. I'll put them in blue. And these guys with just x, I'll put them in purple. And then last but not least, our constants I will put in yellow. So in order to write this in standard form, our exponents have to be going in descending order. So we want to start with our 4x to the thirds because those are our largest exponents. So we're going to add those two terms together. And when I add them together, I'm going to add the coefficients and keep the exponents the same. So I have 4 plus 3 is 7, and then I have x cubed. So I can go ahead and get rid of those terms. Next, I have 8x squared minus 5x squared. So 8x squared minus 5x squared, I'm going to take 8 minus 5, which is going to give me 3. And when I add those together, I'm going to keep the x squared the same. Next, I'm going to add 3x plus 5x, so I'm going to add the coefficients. 3 plus 5 is 8, and then I'm going to keep the x the same. Notice how I'm crossing them off. That just helps me keep track of where I'm going. And then 8 minus 12 is going to give me a negative 4. So let's check to make sure this is in standard form. Our exponents are going in descending order. Remember, this x has an exponent of 1. Not only that, but all of our like terms are combined. So let's go ahead and answer some questions about this polynomial. How many terms are there? There's 1, 2, 3, and 4. So there's 4 terms. What is the degree of the fourth term? Well, if I look at the fourth term, that's a constant. So maybe make a note to yourself. Whenever it's a constant, it has a degree of 0. So whenever something is a constant, it has a degree of 0. So now we need to list all the coefficients. Now remember, coefficients are only the numeric factors of things with x's. So 7 is going to be a coefficient, 3 is going to be a coefficient, and 8 is going to be a coefficient. So 7, 3, and 8. Last but not least, what is the constant? The constant is the thing that's being added on at the end, the thing that's just a number. So the constant for this one is going to be negative 4. All right, moving forward. Let's take a look at this next polynomial that we need to write in standard form. So let's combine our like terms. So first I notice that my largest exponent is 3x, or is x cubed. So first I'm going to take 3x cubed and I'm going to add 2x cubed. So I'm going to add the coefficients and then I'm going to keep the x cubed the same. Canceling those out. So then I have 2x squared plus 5x squared. So I'm going to add the coefficients. 2 plus 5 is 7. And then we have x squared. Next, this x doesn't have anything to be added with, so I'm going to leave it as 3x. Last but not least, we have negative 12 minus 6, which when you add two negatives, it's going to get more negatives, so that's going to give me negative 18. So how many terms are there? There's 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. The degree of the fourth term, again, it's a constant, and so the degree of a constant is going to be 0. Okay, so that's a 0 degree. Then list all the coefficients. So we have 5, 7, and 3. Remember, when you list coefficients, you just write the number, sorry, negative 3. You just write the number, you do not write the x's. And also, constants are not coefficients. Last but not least, what is the constant? The constant is the number being added on at the end. So the constant is negative 18. Okay. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at this. We're looking at it to be in simplified standard form. So the first thing we want to do is write it in standard form. Well, I notice first that my highest exponent is 5x to the 5th. So we can take that out. Then I want to take a look at combining my next like term. So I have 3x cubed minus 2x cubed. 3x cubed minus 2x cubed is just going to give us x cubed. Okay, remember, I'm just adding the coefficients and I'm keeping the exponents the same. Next, I have negative 2x minus 4x. When I subtract those two negatives, it's going to get more negative, and I'm going to get a negative 6x. Last but not least, 4 plus 5, adding those constants, it's going to give me 9. The next question asks for the degree of the polynomial. So that's going to be the highest exponent. So the exponents are the little numbers, and I see that my highest exponent is 5. So the degree of the polynomial is 5th degree. Okay, now I want to take a look at the leading coefficient. So the leading coefficient is the coefficient of the term with the highest degree. Remember, if it's in standard form, it's going to be that coefficient on the first term. So the leading coefficient of the polynomial is 5. All right, let's go ahead and let's take a look at this next one. We want to write the polynomial in simplified standard form. So again, we want to combine like terms. So I see my largest exponent is x to the 5th. So I'm going to start and I have negative 2x to the 5th. Now I want to go through and combine like terms. I have 4x cubed plus 5x cubed. That's going to give me 9x cubed. So I can cancel those x cubed out. Then I have negative x plus 4x. Well, that's going to give me negative x. Minus 4x is just going to give me negative x. So I combined all my x terms. Again, I want those exponents going in descending order. And last but not least, my constant is minus 2. So let's take a look at this. So then we want to do the degree of the polynomial. So I'm going to look for that largest exponent, and if it's in standard form, it's going to be on the first term. So the degree of the polynomial then is 5th degree. And then I want to take a look at the leading coefficient. And the leading coefficient is the coefficient of the term with the highest degree, or the first term if it's in standard form. So the leading coefficient then is negative 2. So that concludes your note video today. Thanks for listening.